John Ulzheimer is known as one of our nation's most recognized credit experts. Having worked for 28 years in the credit industry, John has become one of the most prolific speakers about credit and the go-to authority on answers to credit-related questions. Credit Countdown with John Ulzheimer.
Hello, my name is John Ulzheimer. I am a consumer credit expert, and I spent time at FICO, which is the company that invented credit scoring and maintains the FICO credit scoring system. And I spent some time with Equifax, which is one of the generally recognized consumer credit reporting agencies, one of the big three. Today, I'm going to answer a question that I get periodically, which is, does the age of an account matter relative to your age, especially if it indicates the account was opened either before you were born, before you are old enough to legally obligate yourself to a credit card agreement? So let me give you a scenario that works perfectly. Let's say that you are a young person, say 18 years old, and you want to establish credit. And so you ask one of your parents to add you to one of their existing credit cards as an authorized user. The authorized user strategy is a fantastic way to establish credit. That's how I established credit. My dad added me to one of his credit cards when I was a teenager. That's how I established credit for the first time. And this was decades ago. And so this is still a common way that young people begin to establish a credit report and a credit score. However, keep in mind that you may be added to a card, especially if you're, say, between 18 to 25 years old. You may be added to a credit card as an authorized user that was opened either A, before you were born, or B, certainly before you were 18 years old, and that's how old you have to be to obligate yourself to a cardholder agreement with a credit card issuer. And so the question is as well, is the system smart enough to recognize that I'm just an authorized user, and so it really doesn't matter the age of the account relative to my age because I didn't open the card myself, it was opened by someone else in the past? Or is the system not smart enough to draw that differentiation, and am I somehow going to get penalized, or is the system going to somehow discount the value of the authorized user credit card because it was opened either before I was born or before I was old enough to obligate myself on a credit card? So let me give you my example because it's a perfect example for this question. My father added me to a credit card that he had opened in the 1960s, so that's how long ago, and he added me to it when I was 16 years old. It was opened considerably before I was born. So the question is well, wait a minute, how's that going to correlate, this really old account and person who's relatively young? The credit card issuer normally, of course, there's thousands of credit card issuers in this country, and they all have their own tolerances for things like that. But normally, that's a non-issue because it's commonly recognized that parents will add their children as an authorized user on credit cards, and the age doesn't necessarily jive if that's something that's you're very strict about. And so normally it's a non-issue from being added as the authorized user, and that's an important distinction because if there was some sort of a rule or a policy or a statute that prevented someone from being added to a card where the age of the consumer and the age of the card aren't necessarily logical, if you will, then we would have to talk about that. But we don't because there isn't anything. There's no barrier that would prevent you from being added as an authorized user because you are in fact young and the card is in fact very old. So that's number one. So from that perspective, that's good news because it's a non-issue. So let's talk about the credit reporting side of the equation. The credit reporting side is important because obviously if you're being added to someone's account as an authorized user and it's the first time you've ever been associated with any form of credit, then this is going to create the credit report for you because no one is, you're not born with a credit report. No one is born with a credit report that's just sitting there empty. The report has to actually be created by the credit reporting agencies in your name. And if you've never applied for credit before, then you're not going to have anything. You don't exist. You're essentially invisible to the credit reporting system. Once your name is added to the card and the card issuer reports that to the three credit reporting agencies, that will create a credit report for you. A very thin credit report is going to have your identification information and one account. It's going to have the account showing that you're an authorized user on someone else's credit card. Obviously, the date of birth associated with you and the date opened of the account are not going to match. And in my scenario, it was actually negative, meaning that my date of birth was much lower than, or my age was much lower than the age of the actual credit card. But from a credit reporting perspective, that's okay. As of the recording of this video, there is no sort of logic set up to where the credit card or the credit reporting industry will kick out that particular account and not allow it to be added to your credit report. So from a credit reporting perspective, you're good to go. So being added, you're okay. It being added to a credit report, you're okay. And then third, and maybe most importantly, the impact to a credit score. A lot of people are using this authorized user strategy to either build credit or rehabilitate their credit after some sort of a credit disaster. And the question is as well, is it going to be counted on my credit score once the credit scoring system sees these age issues? So first off, the credit scoring models do not concern themselves with your date of birth or your age. So even if you're only 18 or 21 years old, the credit scoring systems aren't going to see it and then use that against you somehow during the scoring process. So from that angle, there is nothing for them to compare the age of the credit card to. There's no relative value for them to say, oh, this card is so much older than the consumer, therefore we shouldn't count it. So your age, even though it's something that's on your credit report, isn't being considered in the credit scoring system, so you're okay from that perspective. The plus side or the upside to being added to a card that's really, really old is that it absolutely helps a metric in credit scoring systems called the average age of trade. And this is just a math problem. It's essentially the average of the accounts on your credit report. And the older that particular average is, the better it is for your credit score. So if you're choosing to be added to a credit card, and if your parents are willing to add you to a credit card and they're asking you, which one do you want to be added to? I would absolutely be added to one that's very, very old, assuming that it's being paid on time and it has a high credit limit and a low balance and it's being managed appropriately. But choosing one that's very old is actually a very good strategy and should not be something that you avoid simply because you may have this concern about your age relative to the age of the card. So I hope you learned something today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks a lot.
For more videos and credit tips from John Ulzheimer, go to www.tradelinesupply.com.